All right, Laurence. Well, that was a really clever score and just so much fun. Of course, there's the whole question about whether or not dropping beats like this is kind of true to the spirit of Spanish music. It like the more that it happens, the more I'm reminded of, say, like Eastern European music. That's a kind of more in line with that particular cultural thing. But I mean, it's fun and it's a great way to make your entry stand out amongst all the others, for sure. And it's also great to get like a small scale opening, right? There's some bigger scoring as we saw in the mock-up, but it's kind of fun to start off very very fresh and quiet to a degree. Here the balance is a little weird. You're saying two flutes in their middle register, and same thing with a piccolo forte, right? And then you've got piano for your oboes and clarinets. And I mean, the purist in me says frowns on this, but just in practical terms, that does kind of work, to have that kind of strange balance. I think it'll sort of work. And having horns, four horns in F. Which horn? Which horn is that? How many flutes are playing? Oboes, clarinets. Is that A2? What is going on here? There doesn't really seem to be any reference of how many of what and so on. So I think I am definitely going to have a proofreading guide or a like a checklist for the. Then I'm going to put like a link to it right on the form, on the entry form. Did you go over all the things in the on the checklist? Yes or no? Check the box. So anyway, I mean, not to be a stick in the mud or anything, but like honestly speaking, if you're getting this, if you are serious about getting one of your orchestral works ready for the stands, you'll have to mark, divisi, non-divisi, A2, unison, whatever, all the different little things for different parts, different kinds of parts. Okay. But not to suck the fun out of it or anything like that. It's there's still time for me to get a few evaluations in before the before the builders come and spoil all my fun. So let's dig into this now. So you're sending your oboes up to just kind of cheerfully up to this F right in here, and just being aware that that's it's kind of a thin sound, right? And you're keeping the way clear, right? By not having too much accompaniment, and so it will pretty much work. But yeah, I mean, it's good that you didn't go farther, right? And then you contrast that with the piccolo and flutes playing in octaves. So I think that's just a really, really cool idea. There's just so many fun things in this score. Okay, and also the way that you vary things in your first and second group of four bars, right? So the basic statement of the theme. So here we run into some problems though. Like you are sort of thinking that you can transport this approach to this, right? To have the middle register flute family members now play softly, while while you throw in some loud stuff elsewhere. So I think that you need to keep the strength up in here, right? Like you have soft clarinets, but I mean I think that this still is going to need to be at least mezzo piano, if not mezzo forte. So you sort of set down a kind of a balance here. Like perhaps you were thinking, well, I'll just keep my melody instruments loud and my accompaniment instruments soft. Maybe you weren't thinking, oh well, middle register flutes are really weak. I better boost them, right? And then kind of stumbled onto that. But like the truth is, like here, either you're forgetting that or you weren't thinking about that. So like you just cannot have lower register flutes be too soft. Even in a soft situation like this, but you've got your bassoons playing loudly and so on. So I would just say, like, this is the point where oboes and clarinets should be tackling some of these things. Give this B and this little line right in here to one of your flute players or two flute players, whatever, at pitch, right? So this would be written an octave higher in the flute part, and then just leave the piccolo out. Have the piccolo come to an end and then leave it out. And then have this lower stuff played by oboe and so on. And you'll have a way better balance. Anyhow, the whole point is to bring out this bassoon. And bassoon, like, is this solo bassoon? I would say solo bassoon. I'm not really getting any. It's sort of like getting half the information. It's like getting a sentence without a capital letter at the beginning, right? So I kind of don't know where it begins, where it ends, and what it's for, right? So here, I'm assuming that this would be a solo bassoon because it's really better. Like if the line is going to protrude from the music, then it is better off by itself. Now, of course, having said that, it's important to point out that it is doubling the one of the horn players. Which one? Is that first, second, third? Who's playing what, right? So I would say make sure that this is just like one player. Like I would say give this to the second player. Give this to your first because it's a strong, as I said, protruding melody. And then right in here you got your trombones. And something like the whole, like if you were balancing because of flutes and that was kind of a fun thing, that being lower positioned, that's fine. But however, the whole thing is completely unnecessary. You could mark everybody piano, right? And then the players would find their balance. And then right in here, it would really be better to have to like not just let the scoring do the work of balancing your dynamics, right? It's just built right into it, right? What if this whole passage were mezzo forte, and then you just have the extra weight on the melody here, and you have your first trombone player who's going to be loud enough anyways, and it'll just stick out. It'll stick right out. You do not need to mark up your melody and your accompaniment down, right? After a while, it just gets to be, it's just really out there, and you're just constantly tweaking and adjusting, and just make the orchestration do the work. Like right here, you made the orchestration do the work. It is doing fine. Okay, so let's get back to this, but it's just speaking in terms of the evaluation criteria. You are addressing the whole question of not orchestrating things the same way, not doing things the same way twice. And then also the same thing is true right in here. There's kind of a little bit of a, you're sort of fragmenting your accompaniment figures, between the violins and the flute. And I would say that the flute is the wrong instrument to be playing the upper pitches. I think it's better to use like clarinet or some other instrument that's a little more solid in this register, between that and the violins. not to be too solid, but just, it's these little beeps and boops right in here from the flutes are going to be swallowed up by, just by the sound of the oboe solo, right? So it's better to throw in something that's going to be a little bit more present. Like, see, like right in here, you throw in, you're already throwing that in, so it might as well just be clarinet before, right? Okay, and then right in here, this is a little bit more emphatic in terms of your accompaniment. But this is really strange. You're tying and accenting. So I mean, is that intended to be some sort of portato or something like that? Because those should be tenuto marks, not accent marks. It's just really kind of strange. Like I mean, it's not really a thing, really, exactly. So yeah, that just bepuzzles me, my dear friend. So yeah, but like the other question is melodic development soaring quite high, and you compensate and so on. Absolutely zero need for this to be marked ottava. There's lots of room here on the top line, and the piccolo player can easily read all the way up to a high C or a high D with ledger lines, right? So don't bother, right? In fact, that's so annoying, and I have the power here. So, see, look at that. I mean, that's, they can't read a high E, they can read a high E. That's no problem at all. So, just spare the ottava marks on winds and strings, right? Unless you just you have pages and pages of things scored in the top octave for your violins. Is kind of not really any necessity for that. All right. So we're going straight to, and so on. Okay, so I think you're falling into a trap that another entrant fell into in an earlier video in this group of semi-brev evaluations, and that is to treat the downbeat of this bar as the beginning of the phrase. It's not, right? The beginning of the phrase is on the second beat. If you look at the piano score, you can see that the previous phrase ends on the downbeat. This big run ends on the downbeat, and then the big chords and the accompaniment pattern, the chunka 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 kind of stuff going on in the left hand going between F and C, that starts on the next beat, right, on beat 2. And there's kind of a sense of this being premature, and I see I see what you're doing. You're pushing this back because you are playing around with the rhythmic emphasis, and you have all these shortened bars and everything else. Okay, be that as it may, play around with the emphasis as you may. The phrase still ends after the end of the end of the previous one, right? So by dovetailing in this particular instance, you rob the end of the phrase of its emphasis, right? But because basically you're just saying, oh well, this phrase is basically just setting up the next phrase, but it's not in the music, right? In the music, it is achieving completion and leading and dropping deliberately to the next phrase, right? So, anyways, that is a change right in there that I'm not totally hip with. I mean, for the purposes of what you're trying to do here, by being more rhythmically ambiguous, it works great. But in terms of the individuality of the phrasing, it's a problem. Still, the general drift of the orchestration in here is very, very fun. And once again, even though this is marked fortissimo and so on and so forth and forte, you're keeping it light. This isn't the bulkiest kinds of orchestration. I like how you have these descending notes, and then this ascending note right in here, right? And you're more or less not doubling them in the strings, except for the trombone part. The trombone part, by the way, I mean, what's the dynamic? if this is, I would say this should be marked. If you're marking this forte, take the accents away. If you're marking it mezzo forte, you can leave the accents in. All right, but like accented forte for a trombone player can feel like fortissimo to everybody else in the orchestra. I think that is something else I need to throw into the next book of orchestration tips, 100 Last Orchestration Tips, coming in a few years. And that is just like the effect of articulation on different instruments. What are the implications of an accent for a brass instrument, especially something as strong as trombone, compared to the rest of the orchestra. All right. Yeppa bubba bum da 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 dun da 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 dum. There's of course one of my criteria is like the relentlessness of this passage if there's no textural contrast, but that's not an issue. And in fact, the whole concern about the pitch weight of being in the upper middle register in the piano score, that is also not a big issue either because of the way that you're spreading things around. On this next page, we can see the maintaining driving staccato criteria is being observed. And then here you're leading to this very emphatic passage, bum, 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 and it really is a string passage with a bit of support from the brass. Right? And here you're like really making sure, forte, poco, right? You've got this individual little beeps from your C trumpet that are not doubled in any of the string parts. And then you've got your, which horn player? Who was that? Which was this guy? Here, I would say you could do two horns, or you could do like first horn and third horn at forte, doubling all of the, all of your string players, or all of your violin players playing together, both groups of violin players. And then this sort of keeps the melody secure as you're throwing this little higher boop, right? So, in that regard, we have to think about the criteria coming up. Just in general, contrast of color, breadth of texture, and middle register scoring. Well, it's pretty much the same. Looking at this screen and the next screen, which we will in a few minutes, that there's kind of a sameness about it. So I would say that that's something that you could possibly work on were you to take this further and to, look, you never know. You might be sitting in a cafe with somebody who, conducts a community orchestra, and you're talking about this challenge and stuff and how you had fun with it, and asking them whether or not whether that conductor has ever checked out orchestration online. They get real excited about it, and they say, wow, that is like, I remember studying that piece, the four piano pieces, the four Spanish piano pieces by Falla back when I was at university. I just would love to hear an orchestration of that. And you might go home and say, oh my God, I got to get the score ready. What did Thomas say? So, that's the overall premise of having these evaluation criteria, right? Is to just like, what would possibly get it prepared for a more, more reasonable, playable kind of a score that had some kind of, had something to it, where you're thinking about the proportions of how you're orchestrating, right? So, speaking of which, we've got this one high B flat, just so, and this of course is part of the realization of that higher spaced chord there, which would be the fourth bar of B, right? And I just feel that, like, if you're going to have oboe on the E, doubled by clarinet, and then you've got your C trumpet on the D and your trombone on the B flat. Okay, there's just a bunch of things going on. One is, a pro trombone player can just pop out a high B flat like that with no problem. It is not necessarily difficult, but is it is it going to balance with everybody else? It's just so much easier to like, is to have to just to rescore it in a way like because like everybody's playing softly, right? Yeah, ba 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 ba. See what you're really gonna get here is yeah ba 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 da 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 da. You know what I mean? So like if that's what you want, then you better put some accents on here and make sure everybody knows that they're going to be playing loud. However, if what you wanted was yeah ba 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 pling da 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 done, then why not just get rid of the brass and just put in some harp and some like maybe two flutes and an oboe going staccato there at the same time as the harp hits the chord. Do you know what I mean? So it's just like there's ways of doing this that aren't so jarring, right? This is going to be very jarring. It's going to be sort of it'll get a giggle, right, from some people. So and that was part of the criteria as well, keeping the high interjecting notes from sounding too glaringly repetitive or just glaring at all, right? So this one is fine. I would almost say, I would go da 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 da, and just like I would say, take the accent off and write it forte, right? So yeah, just don't let this overpower, especially if you are going, you are interpreting, we're talking about differentiated roles now in closely spaced melodies and overlapping accompaniment figures. So speaking of that, the whole idea of playing this, and by the way, shame on you. Do not do this. What happened here? Bass clef in my viola part. Delete. All right, don't just okay, that's another thing to proofread. Put that on the list. All right, anybody out there who's taking notes. Don't put bass clef in a viola part ever. Okay, so you've got this yabba da 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 da. So like I just I don't understand the context here. We have this crunch 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 da 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 da, and then you want this to be echoed da 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 da. I think that piano is just a little too soft. Maybe mezzo piano here with a crescendo in it, right? Would be good, right? And then here we've got this is still marked forte, right? And here we've got piano second violins, right? Did somebody forget to work out their dynamics a little bit right in here? But I mean, it sort of seems like you are aware of the fact that the brass are going to be playing quite a bit louder. And of course, like their trombone player doesn't have any guidance at all in this section, right? Now here, this forte poco, that was something that I threw into the general part. It wasn't necessarily intended to be imported into the orchestral score, but it was just like that's where people are headed, with their interpretation. Like with the piano score, they'll play this phrase and then they pull back a little bit and then they're playing a little loud, right? Right? They're not playing medium loud like mezzo forte. They're not playing loud, just like a plain forte. They're playing a little loud, right? So that was the whole, like, how do you interpret that orchestrally? Obviously, you don't want to throw forte poco in there because it's a little arbitrary. I've used it before in orchestral scoring, and I've just found people get too confused by it. So I've gone back to some of the scores that I know are going to be played a little bit more and just kind of excised that. And we're changed it around a little bit. So yeah, so just like the dynamics in here are a bit dodgy, right? I just, who is should we even bother to have a second violin part in there when you've got horns playing forte, right? And here I would say, like, for a secure or more direct kind of thing, you should probably have the first and the third playing together on this. And then, the same thing here. A2 would just duplicate this onto the third part and have just the first and the third playing. And then the same thing in here. But like maybe just bring everything down a bit, right? And or maybe just don't have the strings be piano. So like right in here you have a forte, right? So maybe it worked in the mock-up, but it's not going to really work in real life. So you just need to rethink this. Piano strings disappear against forte horns. Okay. So I'll get off of that soapbox and on to the next soapbox. All right, and that is that similar to a previous evaluation, you threw in B flat, right? And in the score it is a B natural, right? Because it's B natural going together with E, and like there's a B natural right here in the cello part. So yeah, I mean, it's just you're setting up a dissonance that's kind of charming. So I mean, if you intended to do it, cool. If you thought that it was a natural, that when it was a sharp, then you need to proofread it. All right, just because there's a B flat in the previous bar doesn't mean that the next bar also has a B flat, because Falla is modulating back to E Phrygian right here, right? That's the whole point of this little phrase. It is setting up the following E, right? As the new tonal center. All right, now this is just a little strange. Maybe not totally thought out. The da da dum, right, is the triplet here. Da da dum, da da dum. Now here you get the triplet right, which probably should be slurred. But here you go. You're just going da, and like maybe this was just a copy paste error, and then you forgot to go back and change some of these, or you got to here and you sort of realize, oh, okay, the first violin cannot play low E, in which case they could go up, right? Or maybe this should be in the violas, where those E's are very easy to reach. So, yeah, or maybe it should just be like, a clarinet or something like that. But it seems to me that you put these triplets in a place where they couldn't, where they are not very well placed for playing the whole pattern. If this is really what you intended to do, then this is what it should look like. Okay, you shouldn't do this. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense, right? That is kind of what you would need to do there. I'm still not sure what you intended right there. It's just really confusing to me. I mean, it sort of works in the mock-up, but we're still losing that sense of dipping down to E with each of these triplets. But the whole question of the triplets overwhelming the melodic line is not an issue, right? Because you've got the melody in the horn, and you got a little bit of accompaniment there from trombone, so that is going to be fine. And that kind of continues on, and that brings up another issue, right? Or actually two different criteria. One was that contrast of color, breadth of texture in middle register scoring, and keeping textural contours fresh and not too much the same, right? So here you kind of elected to just stick with the same strategy, right? And I mean, I can see like you're dying away and you're getting softer and you're subtracting elements and so on and so forth. And you're bringing in the harp here in a beautiful, mysterious way, which I'll have something to say about in a second. Yeah, but I mean, it still really is kind of much of a muchness, as as they say in the Commonwealth, right? It's kind of a bit the same, even though you're subtracting elements. So I would say if the individual constituents of the different parts were more complex, then subtracting the elements would be more unique and breathtaking and noticeable, right? But it's actually fairly simple elements, and they're already scored in a very straightforward way. So subtracting them doesn't necessarily, like the only thing that is unique about that is the harp right in there, right? So I would say, like, if you do run into that guy at Starbucks who wants to perform your piece, think about coming back and adding some progression of the texture, right? Like not just necessarily leaving it the same, but maybe starting richer and then getting sparser, or maybe shifting over to other instruments stating different things, like the melody, like the accompaniment, and so on and so forth. Now here you were kind of making up for that missing E, right? But why couldn't this just be violas, right? Now I can see like the whole point of holding on to the B because that is what the pedal in the piano does. But in that case, it should be like I said it before, or I showed you before, with this being a like a quarter note value, right? Okay. I won't harp on that too much. But speaking of harp, and I've commented on this before, right? And the first thing is, a the main takeaway here is that you just need a straight line between two endpoints and a pedal diagram, right? Because this is really hard to read. The harpist is just going to have to like get on their glasses and kind of look at this and say, okay, all right, so there's a G sharp here. Everything else is set to natural. I see. And then these are all the same. Well, if these are all the same, then what does he need to put them in again? So that's what they're going to be asking of your score. So like not only is this too much work, okay, putting in these notes, it is also unnecessary to restate it over and over again, right? Like a professionally engraved part is going to basically just have lines between endpoints, and then at the beginning it'll just have a harp pedal diagram, right? And that's what you should do too. There's just no need to go through all of this trouble. It looks cool. It looks super badass. It makes you feel like a real pro, but it's unnecessary, okay? And then here, like, there's always a concern of like, where are things leading, all right? And this, the whole part of the criteria of C going forward is whether or not this is leading to the next part. So I cannot really judge from this, and it's not fair to, because I'm only supposed to evaluate up to right here, right? But I would just say, like, if you are going to show this to somebody, then work this out. Work these two bars out, right? And just like really think about what this would be. You don't have to score it, but just like think about what you're leading to here with all of this stuff, and maybe make a few adjustments that I have suggested, or come up with other ideas that are better than mine. And but have this worked out so that it's not just kind of leading to to a big space for that potential person who's going to say, oh, well, I will pay you to finish this orchestration. That would be like the best possible result, wouldn't it? But one way or another, it's just a score that's full of innovative ideas, and especially on that first screen. So like it kind of makes me want to think like, oh, there should have been a continuation of that innovation going forward. There was so much variation and variety and mixing things up, and wow, that could have just continued on. Just like really things feeling like they're coming out of nowhere, and all the proportions being carefully worked out and so on. So anyhow, after that good-natured scolding and some suggestions there, I just want to say that it's an entry that I won't forget, and not in a bad way. I just feel it's just really a nice, and just a nice kind of like change of pace for a lot of the direction of the entries. You're doing things kind of backwards or opposite to a lot of other presumptions, including my own. Okay, so here, this is okay, you don't need to go sforzando mezzo piano with a tenuto mark. What you need is a mezzo piano with an accent mark over it, right? And then I would just say the same thing here. Just put an accent on there. Because like sforzando mezzo piano, like it's you're try to stay away from mezzo dynamics with like I've seen SFMP, SFMF, and it just just try to pronounce that, right? And that kind of tells you right away one of the reasons why it's not more commonly used, right? So just sforzando is an accent. This is a tenuto mark, right? Those are two different things. A tenuto is a big blocky thing. So if you put a sforzando mark on a tenuto mark, that means that you are telling it to be a blocky kind of, it's just one chunk, right? But however, if you're telling, oh, well, right after that, go to mezzo piano, then this is not a tenuto, this is an accent, right? So, of course, the tenuto mark is in there because that is the nature of the piano articulation, right? But it is not the nature of the articulation of a horn player, right? So that's where we get into that differentiation. Look, I can't stop evaluating your score. It's giving me so much to talk about, and those are the kinds of evaluations that I look forward to the most. But I do have to stop now because I'm taking away time that I could in order to get more evaluations done before there's a lot of noise upstairs. So I will just say thank you once again, Laurence, for your really diverting, really amazing score. And thanks so much for your support on Patreon, and for that helps keep the channel going, and it makes this possible for me to do, which I'm very grateful for. And for everybody watching, thanks so much for the comments that you're going to leave under this video, and hopefully Laurence will have a few things to say about your entries as well. And obviously he's got a lot of ideas and a lot of things to put into context and so on. And with that, I will just move on to the next evaluation with, once again, my humble gratitude to you all.